Hello everyone, I'm PapaKenn and welcome to episode 92 of Discovering Doctor Who. Hey, that one actually rhymed. I've probably said that before, but I don't care. Anyway, the episode I'm going to be talking about today is The Caretaker. And wow, it's so easy for me to almost talk about what I thought about the episode. But, as always, let's start with my favorite parts of the episode, starting with number one, the intro. Just the entire intro sequence where Clara and the Doctor are going on these little adventures, especially the very first one, where they're chained to some statues for some reason. And, honestly, part of me really wants to know what in the world was going on. I mean, I know we've had these montages before where it's like, the Doctor and his companion will be doing something and they get out of it somehow. And, those adventures are never really explored, but I don't know, it's just like, for some reason, I'd really like to see what those adventures were. But, that being besides the point, just the entire intro segment was a lot of fun, really funny, and just a good setup for the episode, I felt overall. It really set the tone, I guess you would say, at least for the beginning part of the episode, which I'll get into a little bit more later. Now, number two favorite part of this episode, my phone closed, there we go. Number two is that this episode was a rom-com, a romantic comedy, but in a good way. Kind of like how Shaun of the Dead was a romantic comedy with zombies. This episode was a romantic comedy with sci-fi. So yeah, I guess kind of in a way, Shaun of the Dead falls into that category too, but yeah, whatever. But yeah, it's just like, it was one of those where it's just like, the romantic comedy that's in there, well, it was well done, it was well written, like, it was really enjoyable. The episode had me laughing quite a bit throughout, and I don't know, I felt like it managed the relationship rather well, and I mean, especially early in the episode where the comedy was really in the forefront, I thought it did a really good job in that regard. So yeah, as a romantic comedy, it definitely gets a thumbs up, and much better than most romantic comedies I've seen. And I'm sure you all know some of the ones I'm talking about, or rather the ones I'm not talking about, which are the bad ones. Anyway, moving on. My third favorite part of this episode, John Smith, the Caretaker. The Doctor, I honestly didn't know what to think of him at a lot of points, because, and I will say this, I did mark this as an annoyance, but it did bug me that he was, and it may just be because of this particular personality, this incarnation of the Doctor, doesn't do a really good job of fitting in, but, I mean, both Tennant and Matt Smith, when they were the Doctor, and they had to fit in, I mean, especially Tennant, like, Tennant did a really good job of fitting in to what was going on with, what was the episode? School Reunion. I think that was it. When we meet Sarah Jane, or you all see Sarah Jane again, and I met her for the first time. And, I mean, he was fitting in rather well as a professor in that, in that particular time. But then it's like, this version of the Doctor is just like, he's so awkward, and I couldn't tell if he was doing it on purpose, or if that, again, is part of this version of the Doctor's personality, or maybe a little bit of both. Especially when it came to Danny, I feel like, or the interactions with him, I feel like it was, him intentionally doing it. And, some with Clara, obviously. But for the most part, I just, it was hard to tell, but I absolutely loved it because it led to a lot of really funny scenes. And, it was a comedy that I, to be completely honest, enjoyed. So yeah, there you go. Now my fourth favorite part of this episode was Clara. And first of all, how her role fit into the romantic comedy, especially in that intro, like that back and forth, like little montage. It was almost like a scene that you would see in, some other romantic comedies about halfway through, those little montages. But for me, it really worked. And I really liked how she was putting her foot down with the Doctor when he was getting more than a little bit ridiculous as John Smith, the Caretaker. And yeah, and how she was, basically laying claim to the school, saying, "Is my school in danger?" And I really like the way that they've been writing her for, in recent episodes, but especially this one. Well, I guess in Time Heist, there wasn't a whole lot of her personality that came out. She was more in the background overall. But in this episode, she was really written well. Again, and it's like they've been improving by far, in my opinion, on her, but it's like the character was written well, and Jenna Coleman did an excellent job of acting as her. Just felt like she epitomized a good, the female protagonist of a romantic comedy. I think that's the right way to put it. But yeah, so yeah, Clara was my fourth favorite part of this episode, and for good reason, in my opinion. Now, my fifth favorite part of the episode was Danny, and we finally get to see more of him than just, him and Clara bickering like in the episode where they had their first dates. More than just, kind of overly dramatic, tear scene when the kid asks him about if he had to shoot anyone. But we get to know more about Danny in this episode, and I really liked it. Like, I'm really liking the character after this episode. I think they did a great job and made him he reminds me of Mickey in a lot of ways. Like a more mature Mickey, a more experienced in the world Mickey. But yeah, it's like I can definitely see a lot of parallels in the characters. And maybe I'm just imagining it, but it seems that way to me. And even he's like, he's putting his foot down as far as, he wants to be able to trust Clara, but he finds out, that she's been lying to him a lot, and, he sets some ground rules. He sets some boundaries for them, because it's obvious he wants this relationship to go well. He wants the relationship to succeed, but, it has to be a two-way street, as with, any relationship. And I just really like the way that they utilize the character Danny here, and I know a lot of people said they don't really care for him, but maybe my opinion will change in the future, but as it is right now, I really like him. So, yeah, there you go. Now, my sixth and final favorite part of this episode was Danny and the Doctor, which I guess, it's sort of an extension of the number 5, but Danny and the Doctor is just like, the way they butt heads, the way that they sort of clash together. And admittedly, this is another part of the Doctor that kind of bugged me with this episode, but I can see why they were doing it. It's just like, he kept referring to Danny as PE, like, the PE teacher, and as a soldier, or a former soldier, Danny is incapable of teaching math, which it kind of led me to really be annoyed with the Doctor at certain points. But again, it's like I can see why they were doing that. It's like it has to do with the Doctor's personality, or this particular incarnation of the Doctor's personality, which is definitely, what's a good way to put it? Not user-friendly, I guess is one way you would put it. But yeah, but getting back to what I was talking about, just the way they butt heads, and I think, honestly, the scene that makes the entire episode is when Danny reveals himself on the TARDIS, when Clara was having him be invisible, to see how Clara is in the presence of the Doctor. And oh my god, that back and forth between Danny and the Doctor was just... It was so well acted. Just like, you could see, like, Danny was just sick of this guy. And the Doctor, for his own reasons, is sick and tired of Danny. Obviously because he hates soldiers. But just that entire scene was so well done. And then they ended it, and this is, I guess, including Clara in there a little bit, but, when the Doctor mentions that, she needs to complete the job, as in, she told Danny all about him, she needs to tell him all about Danny. And, that entire scene, and the way it resolves itself. Yeah, we find out that, a lot of the reason why, at least in this particular case, the Doctor is being so protective of Clara, especially regarding a former soldier who would, obviously this version of the Doctor hates soldiers for some reason. He's acting as sort of a father figure, which I just really found, I thought it fit, and it's a big contrast from, what we had before, where, with Tennant, Eccleston, and Matt Smith, maybe Eccleston to less of a, not so much, but especially Tennant and Matt Smith, is like, the companions would become romantic, they would want to have some sort of romantic involvement. But with this doctor, it's like, that's clearly not there, and the doctor is being very protective. He's trying to protect Clara, or at least it seems that way. And it's all very complicated, but I like the way it turned out. I like the way that it's going, and I like the way that all of these relationships are developing. It's like it's still very tense between Danny and the doctor, but there is an understanding. There's sort of there's the potential for some respect between the two of them to grow. And maybe even the doctor can change his mind about soldiers, possibly. And again, but given the doctor's opinion about soldiers in the past, it's like, he hasn't cared for them, he hasn't cared for the military, but he's been civil with them. Whereas, in this season, with this doctor, doesn't really seem to be the case. But I'm getting off topic again. But yes, so my final favorite part of this episode was just the relationship, the conflict, the butting heads of Danny and the doctor. Now, time to move on to my annoyances with the episode, or rather, annoyance. And it's both kind of major, and then at the same time, kind of not for me at the same time. It's really hard to point out because it's a vital part of the episode. But anyway, my annoyance with the episode was the Skovox Blitzer, or however you pronounce it again. And the reason why it's an annoyance is that it never felt like a true threat. Like, we're given this idea that, this creature is capable of essentially decimating the entire planet. Like, it's built in such a way that it would destroy the Earth. And yet, maybe except for that first time when it surprises someone and shoots them, it doesn't... What's the right way to put it? It doesn't feel like much of a threat. Like, maybe it's just the way it was written or something, but, when something... It takes time to process, problem, solution, destroy, or whatever the actual phrase was. When it takes that amount of time to, process all that, I don't know, it just doesn't feel like as much of a threat. Maybe had, some soldiers gotten involved and, the firefight begins. If it's almost invulnerable to firepower like Daleks can be at times, or oftentimes, then, I can kind of see it being an issue. But, if it gets shot and it supposedly blows up and, can destroy the Earth, it didn't come across that way as well. But I feel like that may not be as major of an annoyance as I feel it is, because the focus of this episode wasn't the monster. The focus of this episode was beginning that relationship with Danny and the doctor, it's not a love triangle, but it's like, bringing the three characters together so that all those relationships can start to form. And again, that's the major part of the episode, I feel. So the monster, again, is not the focus of the episode, but at the same time, I feel like it could have been a bit more threatening. It could have been a bit more of a nuisance. It's like, and don't get me wrong, I found the flip that Danny did over the Dalek to be over the Blitzer to be pretty cool. But if it's supposed to be this major war machine, how would it not have, come kind of remotely close to shooting him that entire time, especially when it's like right here? But that's just me. Those are my annoyances. And I do have that happened of the episode. And this was one that I just kind of... It was one of those where it's like, I found it enjoyable, but at the same time it felt unnecessary. And that was Courtney Woods, the little girl that, finds the Doctor, finds the TARDIS, and they have a little bit of back and forth. And her interacting with the Doctor, I honestly thought was rather enjoyable. I found those scenes funny. But then we get to that last one where for some he wanted to show her space and how the TARDIS worked, I guess. But it's like the girl is just kind of like, holding on, she's going to be sick. And I don't know, just that last scene with her just kind of fell flat for me. And I blame a lot of it on, unfortunately, it's like, just being kid actors, it's not that she did a bad job, she did decently enough as a kid, but it's just like when it came to having to act and having to pretend like she was sick, it felt super, super corny to me. But yeah, in the end, it's like, I did find elements of her in the episode enjoyable, especially when we get the little scene with the parents saying, it's like, well, she used to be very, I can't remember the exact phrase, but it's like, she was very something, but you didn't use the word very this time, so that must be an improvement. I don't know, I found that scene, pretty funny. But yeah, so well, that happened was the Courtney Woods girl getting some more scenes with her, not exactly character development. I doubt we'll ever get any real character development out of her, but she's an interesting little character to have there. Just not all the scenes are all that great, I guess. But alright, if you have any other favorite parts of this episode that you'd like to talk about, any other annoyances you'd like to talk about, and of course any, well, that happened sequences or moments, definitely do let me know in the comments down below. I'm looking forward to what you might have to say about that. Because, like I said, this episode had a lot of good moments, and, well, I'll wait and touch on that more when I talk about my overall thoughts. But anyway, yes, let me know down in the comments down below. Now it's time to move on to the track of the episode, and this one, I was considering not actually having a track of the episode for this one, because the Caretaker in the official soundtrack only has one original track, and it was The Caretaker. And at first I was kind of like, great, it's just a one-track deal, hopefully it's at least decent. When I listened to the track, it's a little over 5 minutes long, and it does a really good job. Like, it sounds kind of silly at first, but then it just kind of develops, and the mood changes throughout those 5 minutes, and it's really good. It's a really good track, and if you haven't heard it before, I definitely recommend going on YouTube and finding it just to listen to, because it's really good. I was blown away. It's like, even if it is just, one track for this particular episode, they, in my opinion, blew it out of the water with that one. Made it really appropriate for the episode. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a top 10, maybe as far as tracks of the season go. I don't know. I'll have to listen back and think about that later on. But, I mean, they really did a good job with this one track, in my opinion. So yeah, that's the track of the episode, The Caretaker. Appropriately enough for the episode, The Caretaker. But moving on, it is time... Oh, and if you have any other... Well, actually, you can't have any other tracks. There is the potential for maybe hidden tracks that I don't know about, so if you know of any of those, and you might prefer them over the Caretaker track, let me know. But from what I can tell from the official soundtrack, that's it. So yeah. Okay, now moving on, it's time for the quote of the episode. And... this is one, and this is another one of those moments. It goes back to what I was talking about with Danny, where he sort of like, puts his foot down. He's wanting things to go well with Clara. He's, wanting their relationship to keep going. He's wanting to be a good person. He's wanting to be a good man for Clara, which I guess harkens back to the Doctor's question, am I a good man? That literally just dawned on me. I might actually have to talk about that a little bit in the future, but it just came up off the top of my head, and time to move on from that. The quote of the episode comes near the end, where Danny is telling Clara that, if the Doctor ever pushes her too far, that she needs to tell him and stop following him, or else they can't be together. And, which, it definitely sounds harsh, but, the reasons he gives, really makes sense in the long run, in my opinion. And the quote is this: I know men like him. I've served under them. They push you and make you stronger, till you're doing things you never thought you could. I saw you tonight. You did exactly what he told you. You weren't even scared. And you should have been. That line right there, and it really makes me think about, what's been going on with Doctor Who overall. And this isn't the first time that the topic has been brought up either. There have been other times that other characters, even the companions at times, Rory brought this up at one point, but the Doctor asks so much, and the people, his companions try to deliver and really, be the best they can, which, is always, it's a good thing on one hand, but on the other, that's also how these horrible things end up happening to some of the companions. It's like, that they push too hard to be all they can be, I guess would be one way to put it, for the Doctor. And that's how some of them die. That's how some of them end up, lost forever. I'm sure that there's plenty of occurrences or plenty of instances where things like that happen in classic Who. But yeah, I found that line in particular to be really strong, really powerful, and it leaves me wondering what's going to happen in the future. Like, what's going to happen between Clara and the Doctor? What's going to happen between, all three of them? It's like, how's that relationship going to evolve? Those relationships, rather. And yeah, it just has me really intrigued. It has me really interested to find out what's going to happen in the future. So yeah, there you go. That's the quote of the episode. I feel like this one's been a little bit more awkward than usual. Possibly. Oh well. Alright, now as for my overall thoughts on the episode, it's probably pretty clear. I loved this episode. It was really good. It was really, really funny. And at this point, I honestly don't know which one I liked more, Time Heist or The Caretaker, because they're both really strong episodes. Easily the two strongest of the season so far. Again, in my opinion. But I just, it was just really good, and I felt like the writing was done well. They balanced out the comedy with the dramatic, and wrote the way these relationships are evolving and sort of changing in front of us really well. So I mean, again, even though I did have an annoyance with the monster or the enemy of this episode, that's honestly really all I could come up with, apart from some minor nitpicks that I mentioned during some of my favorite parts. So yeah, it was really, really good, and yeah, top 2 by far. Alright everyone, I apologize if this episode was a little bit awkward, at least as I was talking along here. It felt that way, anyway. Or maybe I'm just being strange today. Did I just rhyme even more? I think so. Alright, but anyway, the next episode I'm going to be talking about is Kill the Moon, which sounds interesting. I am definitely looking forward to it. Unless I'm mistaken, I think a few people have voiced some negative opinions about the episode, but I'm looking forward to seeing what it has to offer all the same, just as with the rest of the episodes, to try and figure out what's going on and try and figure out who Missy is. And by the way, the scene that we get at the end with Missy, with the security guard or whatever he was that got shot down by the Blitzer, we didn't get... I don't know, it just kind of like raises more questions in my head, like, is this an actual heaven that they're in? And if so, who is Missy? Again, I have my theories, but who is she? I'm really wanting to figure that out, and it's actually taking a lot to not kind of spoil myself, because I really want to find out who she is, but I'm holding back, no matter how much it's killing me inside. Oh, and by the way, if you don't have anything good to say about the episode, remember to say something nice. Until next time, everyone, I'm PapaKenn. Alonzi!